The CEO's office at Meridian Technologies always reminded me of a glass cage, pristine, transparent, and isolating. For 15 years, I'd built this company from a struggling startup into an industry titan. James, take a seat. Richard Crawford, our CEO, gestured without looking up from his computer. The merger with Globetech had been my project for 18 months, a billion-dollar deal that would secure Meridian's future and cement my legacy. I'll get straight to the point. Richard finally looked up. The board met this morning. We're making some adjustments to the merger team. Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. What kind of adjustments? Richard cleared his throat. We're bringing in Marcus Wells to lead the final negotiations and signing. The name hit me like a physical blow. Marcus Wells, the 32-year-old son of our CFO, Edward Wells, a kid with an MBA and 3 years at a boutique consulting firm. You're replacing me? The words came out hollow. Not replacing, just restructuring the team. Richard's eyes flicked to my family photo. You've done incredible work, but the board feels Marcus brings a fresh perspective. Edward made a compelling case. Edward made a case for his own son, I interrupted, feeling heat rise up my neck. Marcus has connections at Globetech. He went to Harvard with their VP of Operations. I've spent 18 months building relationships with every key player at Globetech, I said, keeping my voice steady. I know their business inside out. I drafted every clause personally. And that's why you'll still be there tomorrow, Richard said quickly. You'll be supporting Marcus. Supporting. The word landed like an insult. 15 years at this company, and suddenly I was support for a CFO's son who couldn't tell the difference between an earn-out and an escrow. Is this about the Jenkins account? I asked. Richard shook his head. This isn't a punishment, James. It's a strategic decision. The board unanimously approved it. When were you planning to tell me? The signing is tomorrow at 9 a.m. I'm telling you now, Richard said, glancing at his watch. Marcus is meeting with the legal team at 3. I'd appreciate if you could join and ensure he has what he needs. I stood up. And if I refuse? Richard's expression hardened. Then you'd be putting your ego ahead of this company's future. I left without another word. My assistant, Melissa, looked up as I entered my office. What happened? She asked, closing the door. I've been sidelined, I said. Edward Wells's son is taking over the merger. Melissa's eyes widened. Marcus, but he's completely unqualified. Yes. I sank into my chair. Apparently, having the right father matters more than experience. What are you going to do? I stared at the merger documents spread across my desk. What can I do? If I make a fuss, I'm the problem. If I quit now, I'm abandoning ship. After Melissa left, I sat alone, staring at the Manhattan skyline. The sun glinted off glass buildings that seemed to stretch endlessly upward. My phone buzzed with a text from my wife. Still on for dinner tonight? Made reservations at 7. I'd forgotten. We were supposed to be celebrating the merger. I typed back, something's come up, need to prepare for tomorrow. At 3 o'clock, I forced myself to walk into the conference room where Marcus sat with our legal team. He wore an expensive suit that somehow still looked like it belonged on someone else. James! He stood up, extending his hand. Dad told me about the change. I want you to know how much I respect the work you've done. I shook his hand briefly. Let's get started. We don't have much time. Udi, for the next 4 hours, I watched Marcus struggle to grasp concepts that had become second nature to me. The lawyers exchanged glances as he asked basic questions about terms we'd negotiated months ago. So the earn-out structure, Marcus began. If Globetech doesn't hit the revenue targets, they have a grace period of 18 months, after which the payment schedule adjusts according to the formula on page 86, I finished. We've been over this twice already. Marcus frowned. I'm just making sure I understand completely. Tomorrow's pretty important. Yes, it is, I said, which is why you should have been brought up to speed weeks ago, not hours before the signing. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Marcus straightened his tie. Look, I know this is a change, but my father and the board have confidence in me. I felt something snap inside me. Your father and the board aren't the ones who spent 18 months building this deal. I know these people. Globetech CEO David Chen values personal relationships and trust above everything else. Marcus smiled condescendingly. David and I had drinks last week. We get along great. Harvard connection, you know? That was the first I'd heard of this meeting. You met with Chen without telling me? Dad thought it would be good to establish a rapport before the signing. Of course he did. I stood up, gathering my papers. It's getting late. We should continue in the morning before the meeting. Absolutely, Marcus said, looking relieved. First thing, 7 a.m.? I nodded, already heading for the door. In the parking garage, I sat in my car for a long moment. The restaurant reservation with my wife had long since passed. Another promise broken in service to a company that had just shown exactly how much they valued my loyalty. I arrived at the office at 6:30 the next morning. The building was quiet, with only the hum of air conditioning breaking the silence. At 7:05, my phone rang. It was Marcus. James, sorry, running late. Traffic's brutal. Can we push our prep to 7:30? I suppressed my irritation. The Globetech team will be here at 9. We need every minute. I know, I'm almost there, he said. Hey, did we ever resolve that issue with the intellectual property rights for the R550 project? A chill ran through me. The R550 was Globetech's most sensitive technology, their crown jewel. We'd spent 3 months negotiating access rights. It's all in Section 17, I said carefully. What exactly are you asking about? Well, Dad mentioned something about renegotiating those terms at the signing. He thinks we're giving up too much potential revenue by agreeing to the 3-year development timeline. I closed my eyes. Marcus, those terms are locked. We cannot reopen that discussion. Chen is incredibly protective of the R550. Suggesting changes now would destroy his trust. Dad says, your father isn't in the room with Chen. I have been. The IP rights are non-negotiable from their perspective. By 7:45, he still hadn't arrived. I called Richard. The signing is in an hour, and your new merger lead is MIA, I said. Richard sighed. He just called me. There was an accident on the highway. He'll be here by 8:30. That leaves us 30 minutes to prepare for the most important meeting in this company's history, I said. And he's talking about renegotiating IP terms that took us months to settle. What? Richard's voice sharpened. Who told him to do that? Edward, apparently. A long silence followed. James, you need to make sure that doesn't happen. Any last-minute changes could spook them. I don't have the authority to overrule Marcus or his father. For God's sake, James, just make it work, Richard snapped. At 8:15, Globetech's advance team arrived. I greeted them professionally, while anxiety gnawed at my insides. At 8:35, Marcus finally appeared, looking harried. He pulled me aside immediately. Where are we on the R550 issue? He whispered. There is no issue, I said firmly. Those terms stay exactly as negotiated. Edward Wells appeared behind his son. At 62, he was still imposing, silver-haired and sharp-eyed. James, he nodded curtly, Marcus told me about your concerns. But the R550 represents at least $200 million in potential revenue that we're leaving on the table. We're not reopening that negotiation, I said. Not today. Not minutes before signing. Edward's smile didn't reach his eyes. Sometimes the final moments before signing are when the best concessions are made. This isn't a game of chicken, I said. These are serious partners who value integrity. Before I could respond, the room fell quiet as David Chen entered with his executive team. He smiled broadly when he saw me. James? He crossed the room, shaking my hand warmly. The day has finally arrived. Your persistence made this happen. I returned his smile, painfully aware of Edward and Marcus hovering nearby. David, good to see you. Allow me to introduce Marcus Wells, who will be leading our team today. Chen's smile faltered. Oh? I thought you were heading this up, James. Last-minute adjustment to our team, I explained smoothly. Chen shook Marcus's hand with noticeably less enthusiasm. We've met briefly. Harvard connection, right? As everyone took their seats, I positioned myself next to Marcus, with Edward on his other side. Richard sat at the head of the table, launching into a speech about historic partnerships. I noticed Chen watching me with a puzzled expression. We'd built a relationship over 18 months of negotiations. He could sense something was off. The legal teams distributed the final documents as Richard concluded his remarks. Chen's lead counsel began a summary of the agreement terms. I felt Edward lean over to whisper something to Marcus. Marcus nodded, then raised his hand slightly. Before we proceed, Marcus said, there's one item we'd like to revisit briefly. The energy in the room shifted instantly. The intellectual property provisions regarding the R550 technology, Marcus continued. We've reviewed the terms again and feel the 3-year development timeline unnecessarily constrains potential market opportunities. Chen's expression darkened. This is unexpected, Chen said carefully. Those terms were settled months ago after extensive discussion. Marcus smiled confidently. We're proposing an 18-month timeline instead, with accelerated royalty payments to Globetech. I watched the trust drain from Chen's face. Trust I'd spent countless hours building. The R550 represents 10 years of research and development, Chen said, his voice cool. If Meridian is now viewing it merely as a revenue opportunity to be rushed to market, that raises serious concerns about our compatibility. Marcus looked surprised by the pushback. We're simply suggesting. You're suggesting breaking terms we negotiated in good faith, Chen interrupted. He turned to me. James, is this why you were removed from leading this agreement? All eyes turned to me. I saw everything clearly. My 15 years of loyalty, the politics that had sidelined me, and now the imminent collapse of the deal I'd built. I looked directly at Chen. The terms as previously negotiated represent a balanced approach that protects Globetech's intellectual property while allowing Meridian appropriate access. Those were the terms I agreed to. Chen nodded slowly. I see. Edward cut in sharply. Marcus is expressing the board's position on this matter. A position that was never communicated during our months of negotiation, Chen replied. He stood up. I think we need to reconsider whether this merger is in Globetech's best interest. The room erupted in tension. Richard jumped up, attempting damage control. David, surely we can discuss this, but Chen was already gathering his things. When partners change terms at the 11th hour, it reveals how they'll behave after signing. As Globetech's team filed out, the executives sat in stunned silence. A billion-dollar deal evaporated in minutes, and every eye in the room slowly turned to me as if they finally understood what they had thrown away. The conference room cleared quickly after Globetech's departure. Shell-shocked executives filed out silently, leaving just 4 of us, Richard, Edward, Marcus, and me. Richard collapsed into his chair, loosening his tie. What the hell just happened? Edward's face had turned an alarming shade of red. We were making a reasonable business request. Chen overreacted. Overreacted? I couldn't contain myself any longer. You tried to renegotiate his company's crown jewel technology at the signing table. Business is business, Edward snapped. If they were serious about this merger, they wouldn't walk away over one term. Marcus sat silently, staring at the table. The confident Harvard graduate had vanished, replaced by someone who looked very young and very lost. Richard rubbed his temples. The board meeting is at noon. I have 3 hours to explain how a billion-dollar merger just evaporated. He looked up at me. James, I need you to call Chen. Try to salvage this. I almost laughed. Now you want my help? This isn't about ego, Richard said sharply. No, it's about competence, I replied, and respect. You undermined both when you replaced me yesterday. Edward stood up, pointing a finger at me. Watch yourself, Peterson. This attitude won't serve you well. I turned to him calmly. The board should know exactly what happened here. How you pushed your son into a position he wasn't ready for, and how you instructed him to reopen settled terms minutes before signing. Are you threatening me? Edward's voice was dangerously quiet. I'm promising transparency, I replied, gathering my papers. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to see if there's anything left to salvage. Back in my office, I closed the door and took several deep breaths. My phone showed 3 missed calls from my wife. I'd have to deal with that later. I dialed Chen's number, not expecting him to answer. To my surprise, he picked up on the second ring. James, he said, his voice cool. I was just about to call you. David, I want to apologize for what happened this morning. That was not how we do business. A pause. No, it wasn't how you do business. That much was clear. The R550 terms we negotiated were fair. I stand by them completely. I know you do, Chen said, which makes me wonder why I was suddenly facing someone else across the table today. I chose my words carefully. Internal politics, nothing to do with the deal's merit. Politics that cost your company $1 billion merger. He sighed. I've known you long enough to speak frankly, James. Your board just showed me exactly how they operate. Last-minute changes, power plays, the CFO's son suddenly in charge. Is that who I want as a long-term partner? They made a mistake, I said. A revealing one. Another pause. My board is meeting at 3 today. They were expecting to review a signed merger agreement. Instead, I'll be explaining why I walked away. I took a chance. What if you had something else to present? Such as the original agreement, the one we spent 18 months crafting, with the R550 terms exactly as negotiated, and who would be signing for Meridian, the CEO who allowed this mess, the CFO who orchestrated it, his son? I swallowed hard. What if it was me? Chen was silent for a long moment. As Chief Strategy Officer? As CEO? Another silence, longer this time. That's a bold proposition, James. The board meets at noon. They'll need to appoint interim leadership after this disaster. I've been here 15 years. I know this company better than anyone. And if they choose someone else, then you'll have your answer about whether Meridian is worth partnering with. Chen's voice softened slightly. You've always been straight with me, James. I respect that. Call me after your board meeting. I hung up and immediately dialed Thomas Blackwood, our lead director and the most independent voice on the board. Thomas had been my advocate for years, often praising my strategic vision in board meetings. Thomas, it's James Peterson. I need 15 minutes before the emergency board meeting. His voice was grave. I've heard there was an issue with the signing. That's putting it mildly. The deal collapsed completely. I need to brief you on what actually happened. My office, 11:30, he said before hanging up. I spent the next hour preparing my case, pulling up financial projections showing the merger's value and documenting the timeline of events. As I worked, various executives stopped by my office, all asking the same questions. Could the deal be saved? What had gone wrong? By 11:15, word had spread throughout the building. Employees gathered in small groups, whispering anxiously. A merger this size meant job security for hundreds of people. Thomas's office was in a different building, which spared me having to pass Richard or Edward on my way out. Thomas was waiting when I arrived, his normally friendly face serious. "Walk me through it," he said without preamble. I laid out the facts chronologically. My removal, Marcus's last-minute appointment, Edward's push to renegotiate the R550 terms, and Chen's reaction. Thomas listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "And you believe you can salvage this?" "I know I can, but only with full authority." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "You're suggesting the board remove Richard?" "I'm suggesting the board save this company from a catastrophic error in judgment. The merger isn't just about growth, it's about survival. Our R&D pipeline is thin. Our last 3 products underperformed. Without Globetech's technology and market access, we're looking at layoffs within 6 months. Thomas studied me for a long moment. "You've always been ambitious, James. This isn't about ambition. It's about 15 years of building something I believe in, watching it nearly destroyed by nepotism and arrogance, and knowing I can fix it." He nodded slowly. "The board convenes in 20 minutes. I'll make sure you have time to speak." The boardroom was tense when I arrived. 14 members sat around the massive oak table with Richard at the head looking pale. Edward sat to his right, whispering urgently. Neither acknowledged me as I took a seat near the door. Thomas called the meeting to order. "We're facing an unprecedented situation. A merger that was all but finalized has collapsed. Before we hear from management, James Peterson has asked to address the board." Richard's head snapped up in surprise. Edward's face darkened. I walked to the front of the room, feeling oddly calm. "Thank you for the opportunity to speak. This morning, we lost $1 billion merger that would have secured Meridian's future. I'm here to tell you why that happened and how we can still save it." For the next 10 minutes, I laid out the events exactly as they had occurred. I kept my tone factual, focusing on the business implications rather than personalities. When I mentioned my conversation with Chen, several board members leaned forward in their seats. David Chen has indicated that Globetech might still be open to the original agreement, but only under new leadership at Meridian. Leadership that honors the negotiated terms and brings stability to the partnership. Edward stood up, his face flushed. "This is outrageous. He's using this situation to stage a coup." Thomas raised a hand. "Edward, please, let James finish." I continued calmly. "I've spent 15 years helping build this company. I negotiated this merger in good faith over 18 months. I'm offering to step up as interim CEO to salvage the deal and stabilize the company." Richard finally spoke, his voice tight. "The board appointed Marcus based on his qualifications. One misstep doesn't justify this kind of overreaction." Several board members exchanged glances. "One misstep that cost us $1 billion, said Janet Freeman, one of our most outspoken directors. "And nearly tanked our stock when the news breaks. The relationship with Chen is salvageable," I said, "but only if we act decisively today." Thomas nodded. "Thank you, James. Would you mind stepping out while the board deliberates?" In the hallway, I checked my phone again. 5 missed calls from my wife now. I texted her quickly, "Still in crisis mode. Will explain everything tonight." Her response came immediately. "Are you okay? What's happening?" Before I could reply, the boardroom door opened. Thomas stood there, his expression unreadable. "The board would like you to come back in, James." The room fell silent as I entered. Thomas gestured for me to take the CEO's seat. Richard had moved to the side, his face a mask of anger. Edward was absent. "The board has voted," Thomas announced, "to appoint James Peterson as interim CEO, effective immediately, with a mandate to salvage the merger with Globetech." Relief washed over me, followed by the weight of responsibility. "Thank you for your trust," I said. "I'll contact David Chen immediately." "Richard will assist with the transition," Thomas continued. "Edward has been placed on administrative leave pending review." After the board members left, Richard remained seated. "You won this round," he said quietly. "This wasn't about winning. It was about saving the company." He laughed without humor. I've been CEO for 12 years. And you made a mistake. We all do. I gathered my papers. I'd value your input during transition. Richard stood up. Watch your back with Edward. He doesn't forgive easily. Back in my office, I called Chen. It's done, I said. The board has appointed me interim CEO. Congratulations, Chen replied. That was faster than expected. They recognized what was at stake. How's your board feeling? Cautiously optimistic. They've authorized me to proceed with the original agreement, assuming we can sign today. Today. I hadn't expected things to move so quickly. My legal team never left the city. We can be at your office by 4 p.m. I checked my watch. 2 hours. We'll be ready. I called Melissa to prepare the conference room and notify our legal team. Then my wife called. James, what's going on? I've been calling all day. The merger fell apart this morning, but I've been appointed interim CEO to save it. A moment of silence. You're the CEO now. Interim, and only if I salvage the deal. That's incredible, she said. Are you okay? I'm still processing. Globetech is coming at 4 p.m. to sign. Can we celebrate tonight? Of course. I'm proud of you, James. The words hit me harder than expected. Through all the missed dinners, she'd supported my dedication to Meridian. At 3:45, I entered the conference room. The original agreement, my 18 months of work, sat at the center of the table. At 4 p.m., Chen arrived. I greeted him in the lobby. The new CEO himself, he smiled, extending his hand. Interim, I reminded him. We'll see about that, he replied knowingly. The signing was straightforward. The legal teams verified the documents matched our previously negotiated terms. Still comfortable with the 3-year development timeline? Chen asked, eyes twinkling. Absolutely, it's right for both companies. At 4:47 p.m., we signed the final page. $1 billion merger, completed. Applause and handshakes followed. This calls for celebration, Chen said. Dinner at Capitale, 7 p.m.? I thought of my wife. I have a prior commitment I can't break. Chen nodded. Family. A dinner date I've already rescheduled once. Say no more, Chen smiled. Go home to your family, CEO Peterson. As Globetech departed, Thomas pulled me aside. The board meets tomorrow to discuss your permanent appointment. After today, I don't anticipate opposition. Thank you for your support, I said. You earned it, he replied. Alone in the conference room, I looked at the New York skyline. 24 hours ago, I'd watched helplessly as Marcus floundered. Now I was CEO, the deal was signed, and the company's future secure. My phone buzzed. Reservations at Del Posto, 8 p.m. Don't be late, CEO. I replied, nothing will keep me away. Melissa appeared with a tablet. The news is already out. The headline read, Meridian Technologies completes billion-dollar merger after leadership shakeup. And our stock was up 12% in after-hours trading. Not bad for your first day, Melissa said. Have communications prepare a company announcement for morning, I said, and schedule an HR meeting tomorrow. The chief strategy officer position needs an upgrade. Her eyes widened as she realized I meant her. Right away, sir. As I left, Chen called again. How would you feel about joining Globetech's board? My board is impressed with how you handled today. I'd be honored, I replied. In the elevator, I reflected on the past 36 hours. One day, cast aside for someone's son. The next, CEO with a board seat at our largest partner. I stepped outside into the evening air, hailing a taxi home. For once, I was leaving early enough to see the sunset. As we pulled away, I looked back at the building that had been my second home for 15 years. Today, it had taught me a valuable lesson. Integrity and competence eventually win out over politics and connections. And sometimes karma arrives right on schedule.